Sony has the 24-70 f2.8 G Master II. Tamron has the 28-75 G2. And so it only makes sense that now Sigma also has a 24-70 f2.8 DG-DN2. And there are a number of improvements with this one. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to review the original 24-70 from Sigma. I don't know why. But this one should be better externally, internally, optically, all of the above. And while I don't have the G Master 2 to compare it to, I do have my Tamron 28-75 G2. And so why not compare these two while I'm at it? From a packaging standpoint, there's nothing new to report. White box, manual, zippered pouch, straps for the pouch, lens hood, lens caps, and the lens. But all of this is good stuff because even Sony doesn't give you a pouch or lens hood with some lenses. And Sigma's lens hoods are really solidly made. Now the lens itself is solid. It feels great. It's an art lens, which means it's made to go up against the G Master. And there is something about the construction that I wanted to mention. Sigma talks about focusing on reducing size and weight, but they also use metal parts for the zoom extension unit as well as a robust internal structure to ensure rigidity during use, even down to carrying the lens. But they threw in this sentence, and I quote, "The design emphasizes the lens longevity and reliability as a tool which cannot be achieved by solely pursuing a compact and lightweight body." And I admire that statement because it's almost like an excuse for them to make the lens heavier than it needs to be just to be structurally solid. But it's also like a punch in the face of Sony and Tamron, who you can argue are doing that exact thing. Now this Sigma is 10% lighter than the original and it's 7% smaller, but I still think this is a large lens. In terms of weight, it's heavier than the 536 gram Tamron and the 695 gram GM2, coming in at 734 grams. But what I can tell you with certainty is that while it is about the same size as the Tamron, holding them in my hands, the Tamron feels more like a prop than a real lens. The Sigma just has an absolutely premium feel to it that goes beyond the weight and the materials. Both the Sigma and the Tamron are made in Japan, but with the Tamron you can feel it's made to a size and a weight and a budget, whereas with the Sigma it seems like they didn't care about any of that when making it. Obviously they did, but it just doesn't seem like the beam counters got to the production leads. Starting at the rear, there's a metal mount with electronic connections, weather sealing gasket, and this lens is dust and splash resistant. 024 on the side indicates a 2024 release. Minimum focus is a small 0.17 meters and made in Japan. There is an aperture ring here, which apparently was missing on the original, and in typical Sigma fashion, it's wonderful. Clicky or declicked with a lock into or out of A for auto aperture. Sigma logo, lens specs, A for art logo, and then you get to the zoom ring, and it feels really good. Smooth, good resistance level, good dampening. It's a huge step up from my Tamron. In front of that, you get two customizable buttons, an AF/MF switch, and a zoom lock switch. And this zoom lock is interesting as you don't have to unlock it to zoom. It just unlocks automatically. So if you're packing your lens away and don't want the barrel to extend, you lock it, and when you are ready to shoot, just rotate the zoom ring and you are on your way. Another thing to notice here is Sigma usually has these buttons and switches raised on the side of their lenses, whereas here they sit flush with the lens body. And the idea of that is to further slim down the barrel over the original one. Focus ring is up here. It's electronic, super smooth, grippy, but I doubt many will use it. Around the front, huge front lens element, no writing, no specs. It's nice and clean up here. Inside, there are a whopping 19 elements in 15 groups, a bunch of super advanced ones. In particular, Sigma mentions 5 ultra high precision aspherical elements that are super thin and polarized for excellent optics. There's also an 11 bladed rounded diaphragm, and then the autofocus. Big improvements in that department with Sigma's high thrust HLA or high response linear actuator. I don't know if it's a new linear motor or the same one that they used in other recent Sigma lenses, but I suppose if it was new that they would have renamed it something like HHLA or something. Anyway, on my A7C, it's a great lens. It feels so much better built than my camera body that it's like the 7C doesn't even deserve it. Look, I'm not in the market for a full frame lens, but this thing seriously has me contemplating dumping my Tamron already, and I haven't even compared the optics yet. And before I do, let's take a look at some sample photos that I took with this lens and my Sony A7C. All of these are straight out of the camera, unedited, unprocessed, uncorrected, no picture profiles, no fanciness. just what you can expect from JPEGs from your A7C and this thing. Ready, set, go. Alright, so it's a sharp lens as you would expect. It's an art lens. It's kind of the top of the line for optics when it comes to Sigma. And it's a new Sigma release. Really, I haven't been disappointed by a new lens from Sigma in 5 years. But I did want to see how this thing compared to the Tamron that I own. And so here they are side by side, and here are some photos side by side. Center sharpness is comparable between the two, slight edge to the Sigma. The corners are noticeably sharper on the Sigma, and this applies to any focal length that I tried. The bigger difference that I noticed is how much better the Sigma is at controlling that chromatic aberration. So while there's not a drastic difference between these two lenses, you can see that the Sigma does improve on the optics of the Tamron. But beyond the Sigma sharpness, the colors look great. The distortions are well controlled. Chromatic aberration, as you just saw, is handled very well. Flaring is also well controlled. There is some green and purple flares if you shoot into the sun. A little bit of loss of contrast, but not very much. But these sort of flares are hard to avoid with a bright light source. Barrel distortion seems to be a non-issue no matter the focal length, but there is some noticeable vignetting at 24mm with or without the included lens hood. Bokeh performance is excellent with this lens. The bokeh balls are smooth, backgrounds are blurry and not distracting. It's really something that I've come to expect with art lenses. All of them perform very well in terms of bokeh quality. Now the minimum focus on this new Sigma is 6.7 inches, which means basically once you have this thing mounted on your camera, you can touch the front of your lens to your subject almost and get it perfectly in focus, which is impressive. But the Tamron is not much worse at a minimum focus of 7.1 inches. So in terms of autofocus, this Sigma is up there next to the best. Tracking is excellent. I didn't have any issues with misfocus shots or hunting while shooting my samples. Really, for a non-Sony lens, this is probably as good as autofocus can get. When it comes to tracking someone running towards you, I'm sure the G Master might be better for this sort of thing, but for most people, you won't be pushing this autofocus system this far. And at this point, I'm beginning to think that the A7C is the problem more than the Sigma itself, because I'm sure if my camera body had that AI processor, it would help me a lot in this scenario. Amazingly, this 24-70 is another one of Sigma's lenses that basically has no focus breathing through the zoom range. No fancy software needed, it's just designed well, so kudos to them. So let's talk about price. If you wanted to get the Sony G Master, you need to shell out $2,300 US for that privilege. The Tamron, well, it's on sale today for $700 US, so less than 1/3 of the price. Granted, at 28mm, it's not as wide and therefore you can argue not as desirable. This Sigma then is going to slot in at $1,200 US, which is $500 more than the Tamron, but $1,100 less than the Sony. In all, I think pricing is where you can expect it to be, given that the strength of the dollar is not what it used to be. Now it just comes down to whether or not I can sell my Tamron at not a significant enough loss for me to justify upgrading to this lens or not. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. How does this thing perform? Are you surprised by its release? What is your favorite full frame kind of kit lens replacement 24-70 between the Sony, the Tamron, the Sigma, something else? Sigma also has a 28-70, I believe. that I reviewed a while ago. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for watching, for subscribing, and for supporting this channel. Stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.